Hello and welcome back. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at the SimpleDialog widget. The SimpleDialog widget allows you to display a simple dialog to the user of the application. You'll notice here we have our homepage state class, which contains a build method returning a scaffold with an app bar. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a floating action button for the purposes of this demonstration. The floating action button is going to have a child, which will be an icon, which will be the open in new window icon. We'll also need to specify the onPressed callback function, and for now we will just leave that blank. You'll notice there we have our floating action button with the open in new icon as its child. What we're going to do now is just specify the background colour of the floating action button, which by default matches the theme's primary colour, in this case blue. What we do then is just set the background colour to match the variable that I've defined in the state class called colour. By default the value of colour is null, which means the background colour here is null, hence the floating action button using the default background colour of the application theme's primary colour. Inside this onPressed callback function, we are going to display our SimpleDialog. Now what we're going to want to do is make this onPressed callback function asynchronous, because the SimpleDialog is an asynchronous operation. What we're going to do is specify final color equals, and we're going to call the showDialog function. The showDialog function allows us to open up a type of dialog, whether that's a simple dialog, an alert dialog, or just a dialog. You'll notice that the context is a required parameter of the showDialog function. And you'll notice how showDialog returns a future of type T. Now this showDialog is going to return a colour, so we're going to specify the type that the showDialog returns as colour, and we're going to use await, because by default the showDialog function, which displays the SimpleDialog in this demonstration, is, as we explained earlier, asynchronous. We'll pop that on a new line there to space it out nicely, and you'll notice that one of the other parameters we have available to us is this builder parameter. This builder parameter is what will actually build the dialog, in our case a SimpleDialog. This is a function, once again, which provides us with a context and expects us to return a widget. And what we're going to do is return our SimpleDialog, like so. Now you'll notice the SimpleDialog exposes a number of parameters, such as title, the padding of the title, a list of child widgets, the padding for the content, i.e. the list of child widgets, a custom background colour for the dialog box itself, an elevation, semantic label, and a shape of the dialog. We will just leave most of these as their default value for the moment, and we will just simply specify a title, which will be a text widget, and it will simply say select a colour. Now when I click this floating action button, you'll notice there we have a SimpleDialog with a title of select a colour. Now what we'll do is we will give this SimpleDialog a list of children. This is commonly a list of SimpleDialog options. As you can see there, we have a SimpleDialog option widget, and the SimpleDialog option allows us to specify a child, padding, and onPressed. So what we'll do for now is just fill this in with an empty callback function for onPressed, and we will give it a child of a text widget with a value of red. what we'll do now is copy and paste this a couple of times, and we'll have one for green, and we'll have one for blue. If we save this, pressing that floating action button again will display our SimpleDialog with the same title, select a colour, but this time with 3 SimpleDialog options, red, green and blue. Now before we move on, we'll have a look at some of the customization options available in the SimpleDialog. As you notice, you can set the title padding and content padding to suit your requirements. You can also specify the background colour, the elevation, the semantic label and the shape. Let's go on ahead and take a look at the background colour parameter. What we can do here is specify background colour, and we can, for example, make this amber. You'll notice how the SimpleDialog now has an amber background. You can play around with any number of these different parameters, such as the colour, the padding and the other options that are available to you in order to customise your SimpleDialog to fit your requirements. Moving on, we'll now have a look at how we wire up these SimpleDialog option onPressed parameters with the final colour variable that we expect back from the show dialog. Inside this first onPressed parameter, we can specify navigator.of_context, and we are going to want to pop, passing in a result of colours.red. This essentially means that the SimpleDialog will be popped off of the navigation stack, as in it will close, and it will return a value of colours.red, which means that showDialog will return the colour red. Likewise, we'll fill in the other two with a similar pattern, navigator.of_context.pop, in this case colours.green. We'll also do the same, last but not least, with the blue SimpleDialog option. Again, navigator.of_context.pop colours.blue. Essentially what this means is, when we click on the green SimpleDialog option, it will close the SimpleDialog, returning a colour of green. Likewise, the blue SimpleDialog option will close the dialog, returning a colour of blue. If we save this, you'll notice our dialog with the 3 options, red, green and blue, and if we click on one of these, it will close the SimpleDialog, returning the particular colour that we have pressed on. Last but not least, we will simply just need to wire up the colour that's returned from the dialog with the colour of the floating action button. So what we can do is we can call the set state, and we can update our colour variable with the colour that has been chosen by the user from the SimpleDialog. If we now save and run this, you'll notice that we have these 3 choices once again. However, if we were to click the red colour, you'll see how the background colour of the floating action button updates to match the colour that we have selected from the SimpleDialog, in this case colours.red. Likewise, if we were to pick one of the other colours, you'll notice how the floating action button will automatically update its background colour based on the SimpleDialog option that we have selected. Last but not least, we'll take a look at some of the options available to us in the show dialog. You'll notice that we've used the context and the builder. However, other options that are available include barrier dismissible, barrier colour, use safe area, use route navigator, route settings and child. At the time of recording, child is deprecated and you are advised to use the builder parameter to return your dialog. You'll notice here that if barrier dismissible is false, then it means that the user will not be able to click on the surrounding area to close the dialog. To show this in action, we will specify underneath the builder, just to here, we can say barrier dismissible false. And with that barrier dismissible set to false, if we click on an area outside of the dialog, you'll notice how the dialog does not dismiss. With the barrier dismissible set to true, however, which is the default, we will be able to dismiss the dialog by clicking on the area surrounding the dialog. You can also change the colour of that barrier to suit your requirements. So essentially, the SimpleDialog allows you to specify a custom title and a list of options for the user to choose from. You can then use one of these options that the user has selected to update a value in your application. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for watching.